The morning fog still clung to the hedgerows like wool pulled over the landscape. Wet earth, crushed grass, and the faint metallic tang of burned cordite hung in the air. The sun hadn't fully broken through yet, and the battlefield sat in that eerie half-light between night and day, the time when soldiers see shapes that may or may not be real. From the tree line overlooking a narrow farm road, Oberleutnant Ernst Hafner, a veteran Panzer officer of the 11th Panzer Division, lifted his Zeiss field binoculars and squinted into the mist. His black leather gloves creaked as he adjusted the focus. There, he muttered to the loader beside him, Gefreiter Otto Riemann. Sherman column. Probably another replacement battalion. Look, he lowered the binoculars slightly. They've plastered junk all over them again. Riemann smirked. The Americans must build tanks in barns. A third voice, deep, amused, emerged from behind them. Feldwebel Dieter Krantz, commander of a nearby Pak-40 crew, stepped forward with a grin slicing across his face. Barnyard tanks, he said. Perfect name. You could mistake those things for livestock pens. Down on the road below, the American tanks moved slowly, engines rumbling, tracks clipping stones buried in the mud. But these weren't the clean, olive-drab Shermans the Germans were used to seeing. The silhouettes looked wrong. Slabs of crude welded steel dotted the holes and uneven patches. Sandbags were stacked 3 and 4 high over the glassy plate. Thick wooden planks were bolted along the sides. One tank even had massive lumps of hardened concrete spread around the turret like a crude outer shell. To the Germans, it looked ridiculous. To the Americans inside, it was survival. But the German officers watching didn't know that yet. Hafner laughed quietly under his breath. What are they thinking? Concrete? Sandbags? Do they expect that to stop a pack at 800 meters? Krantz shrugged theatrically and gestured at his gun. Let's give them a proper physics lesson. The Pak-40 crew shifted into action. The gun captain whispered orders, boots thudded into the mud, a shell was already swaying in a loader's hands. The 75mm anti-tank gun's barrel depressed slightly as the weapon found its mark. On the road, inside the leading Sherman, a worn M4A3 belonging to the U.S. 37th Tank Battalion, Staff Sergeant Louis Lou Carter wiped condensation from the periscope with his sleeve. He hated mornings like this. Fog meant shapes shifted and threats blended into the earth. Today, his tank felt even heavier than usual, burdened by nearly a ton of field modifications his crew had spent nights welding, stacking, and pouring, all while taking jokes from passing infantry who called their tank a concrete cow. But Carter and his men had learned something the hard way in Normandy. A Pak-40 didn't leave second chances. Driver, ease up, Carter said through the intercom. Visibility's crap. Let's not look like we're rushing to get killed. The driver, Private First Class Jimmy Rowland, answered with a simple, yes, Sarge. The tone wasn't fearful, just focused, the sound of a man who'd seen too many friends burn in too many tanks. Behind Carter, the gunner Corporal Frank Delgado tapped the breech casually with a knuckle. Think they'll laugh at us again today, Lou? They always do, Carter said. Let them. Laughing means they don't understand. A crack split the air. Hafner's Pak-40 fired, the first shot of the day. The Sherman crew heard the unmistakable hiss of a 75mm APC-BC round slicing through fog and distance. The shell slammed into the lead tank's glassy plate with a metallic blast that echoed down the valley. But instead of punching through the armor and ripping inside, the round buried itself in the stacked sandbags and improvised welded plate beneath. Dirt burst outward in a brown cloud. Shrapnel sprayed in every direction. Inside the Sherman, Carter flinched but immediately realized the truth. They were still alive. The tank had taken a Pak-40 hit, and survived. Delgado blinked at the scorched sandbag fragments drifting past the vision block. Holy, Lou, it didn't get through. Roland shouted from the driver's seat, we're good. We're good. At the pack position, the German laughter stopped instantly. Krantz stepped forward, eyes narrowing. Impossible. That range, that angle, it should have gone through. Hafner didn't answer. He simply lifted his binoculars again, slower this time, studying the crude American modifications he had mocked just seconds before. He saw the impact crater. He saw the sand, the plate, the concrete shaping the turret. And he saw the truth settling like a stone in his stomach. These barnyard tanks weren't jokes. They were problems. And they were getting closer. The American tank lurched slightly as Roland powered through a rut in the dirt road. Carter gripped the periscope handles, steadying himself. His heart pounded in his ears, but the training kicked in. They had survived the first shot, now they needed to make it count. "Delgado," he barked, "find that gun, now!" The gunner already had his hands on the elevation wheel, coaxing the 75mm tube upward as the turret motor hummed. Come on," he whispered, searching through the mist for the telltale muzzle flash. Then he saw it, a thin ribbon of smoke curling from a hedgerow at their 11 o'clock. Target acquired. Carter didn't waste a breath. Fire! The Sherman's cannon roared, the recoil smashing back into the turret walls. The high-explosive shell ripped across the field and blew apart the brush around Krantz's pack crew. Dirt and leaves erupted in a violent spray. The Germans threw themselves flat, some diving behind the gun shield, others scrambling for cover. But the pack wasn't out. Hafner rose to one knee, mud streaking his uniform, and shouted through the chaos. "Reload! Quick, before they adjust!" The loader rammed another shell into the breach, the metallic clack rang like a hammer strike. The gun captain swung the trails slightly to compensate for the shockwave of the American shot. They still had a clear angle on the Sherman as it advanced. Fire! The second shot cracked across the valley, faster, angrier, determined to erase the embarrassment of the first. Inside the Sherman, the crew braced. The impact hit the improvised armor with a deafening thud. The entire tank shuddered, metal groaning. Concrete dust sprinkled down from the turret as if shaken loose from a storm cloud. Delgado swore. "They're zeroed in on us." Carter saw flakes of sand and broken concrete sliding down the armor outside the periscope. The Pak-40 had hit precisely where it wanted, and still hadn't penetrated. "Roland!" Carter shouted. "Punch it! Zigzag! Make them work for it!" The Sherman accelerated, treads grinding mud into black stripes behind them. The tank rocked violently side to side as the driver swerved, trying to spoil the German aim. In the hedgerow, the German crew stared in disbelief. Riemann looked at Hafner, eyes wide. "Sir, that should have killed them." "It didn't," Hafner muttered. His voice was low, guttural, less surprise, more calculation. "Again. Aim for the turret ring. The armor there is thinner." But Krantz stepped forward, wiping soot from his face. His tone had changed entirely from the earlier mockery. "Sir, if their armor can absorb 2 hits at this range, we need to be careful. That is not a normal Sherman." Hafner hesitated. Not out of fear, he'd faced far worse odds during the retreat from Normandy, but because for the first time, the Americans' crude improvisations no longer looked like foolish attempts at protection. They looked like evolution. He forced the doubt aside and snapped back into command. "One more shot. Make it count." Back on the road, Carter steadied himself against the tank's swaying motion. "They're still firing," Roland warned. "Let them," Carter said, voice firm. "Delgado, give that gun another E. Keep their heads down." Delgado grinned, adrenaline sharpened to a razor's edge. "With pleasure." The turret jerked into position. The breech slammed forward. And the Sherman fired again. The shell struck near the pack's right trail, flipping dirt and splinters over the crew. One gunner screamed as a shard of wood sliced across his cheek. The weapon itself was intact, but the crew was rattled. Hafner activated his throat mic. "Panzergruppe, this is Hafner. Sherman variants with improvised armor are approaching grid." His headset crackled. "Understood, Oberleutnant. Night Tiger is en route." A Panzer IV or Panther would have been typical. But a Königstiger? That meant the High Command assumed the threat was serious. Hafner's jaw tightened. He glanced again at the lead Sherman, still advancing, scarred by impacts that should have destroyed it. Barnyard tank, he murmured. But built for slaughter. Krantz signaled the crew to reposition. Sir, if the King Tiger arrives, it can. It's not here yet, Hafner snapped. And until it is, we hold them here. The pack crew scrambled to shift the gun, digging in their heels, shoving with their shoulders, trying to keep pace with the American advance. But the Shermans were moving faster now. 3 more emerged through the fog, each clad in their own mismatched armor, sandbags, welded plates, spare track links bolted across the sides. To the Germans, the sight no longer looked ridiculous. It looked like determination given physical form, American crews refusing to die quietly. Inside Carter's tank, Delgado called out, "Second Sherman's flanking right." "They're spreading out." "Good," Carter replied. "Let's break their angle." Then, in the sudden quiet between cannon blasts, Roland said something the crew had been thinking since the first pack round failed to kill them. "Lou, maybe all this junk actually works." Carter didn't smile. He simply stared through the periscope at the German position ahead, the muzzle of the Pak 40 glowing slightly from repeated firing. "It works," he said. "And today, we prove it." The Sherman roared forward. The ground trembled beneath the treads as Carter's Sherman surged ahead, its improvised armor still shedding bits of sand and concrete like the scales of a battered beast. The fog finally began to lift, peeling away from the valley floor and exposing more of the battlefield, the hedgerows, the burned-out wagon, the splintered fence posts, and the German Pak 40 crew scrambling to reposition their gun. "Range closing," Delgado murmured, eyes pressed into the sight. 200. Maybe less. Roland wrestled with the controls, trying to keep the Sherman unpredictable as it weaved. The tank's engine roared, the smell of exhaust mixing with the lingering smoke from their last shot. Then Carter caught movement on the left through his periscope. Second pack. 10 o'clock. Another German crew, previously hidden behind a hollowed stone barn, swung their 75mm gun into action. A shell slid into their breech. Their commander shouted an order. Carter didn't hesitate. "Delgado, left pack." The turret groaned, the stabilizer whining as the gunner spun the cannon toward the new threat. But the Germans were faster. A flash. A crack. A 75mm round tore across the open field like a spear of fire. It slammed into the Sherman's left flank, where welded track links had been bolted in mismatched rows. The tank lurched violently. Inside, the crew rocked in their harnesses. Delgado slammed into the padding on the turret wall. Roland cursed and frantically corrected their line. But again, impossibly, the tank held. "What was that?" Delgado hissed. "Hit the tracks?" "Hit the add-on armor," Carter said, breathing hard. "And didn't go through." Roland laughed nervously. "They're gonna lose their minds out there." Carter didn't answer. He was too busy studying the battlefield. The Germans were no longer mocking. They were frantic, shouting, repositioning, dragging ammunition crates. The pack crews moved with jittery urgency rather than calm confidence. They had seen 2 solid hits fail. And then came a new sound. A deep, distant growl. Mechanical. Heavy. Delgado heard it first. Lou? That's not a pack." Carter stiffened. He knew that sound. Every Allied tanker did. A Königstiger. The King Tiger's Maybach HL-230 engine rumbled like a rolling thunderstorm, its growl echoing through the valley even before the massive turret appeared over the rise. "Driver," Carter said, voice suddenly lower, tighter. "Ease up. Let me see." The fog thinned just enough to reveal the silhouette, a colossal outline moving with calm, deliberate menace. Sloped turret front. Thick glassy. The monstrous 88mm KWK-43 gun pointing down toward the valley like the finger of a god preparing to deliver judgment. Roland swallowed hard. "Lou, we can't fight that." Carter didn't lie to him. No. Not head-on. Behind them, more Shermans appeared, their own improvised armor giving them a brutish, patchwork appearance. 3 tanks fanned out, careful, deliberate, like wolves approaching a boar. The second pack fired again, but its shot went wide as the crew panicked at the sight of the King Tiger firing up. Their nerves were broken. Carter seized the moment. "Delgado, take out that pack before it regains its composure." "Aye." The Sherman's gun barked, and the E-shell smashed into the stone barn, collapsing half the wall and burying the pack crew in a storm of dust and broken masonry. A scream echoed, then silence. But the King Tiger was now fully visible. And it was looking right at them. The first round thundered from its 88mm cannon, the muzzle blast ripping a cone of fire into the air. The shockwave hit before the sound reached them, slamming into the Sherman like a hammer. The shell roared across the valley. Roland jerked the controls. The Sherman skidded over mud, treads clawing desperately. The round missed by only a few feet, kicking up a geyser of earth that rained across the hull. "Holy hell!" Delgado yelled, voice cracking. "That would have turned us into paint." Carter breathed through gritted teeth. "We're not here to trade blows with that monster. Our job's the packs. The infantry behind us needs that road clear." Roland nodded. "So we keep moving?" "We keep moving." Another Sherman, call sign Blue 3, surged up beside them. Its commander, Lieutenant Harris, popped the hatch and shouted over the engine noise. "You guys still alive? That Tiger just fired at you." Carter answered, "We noticed. Flank left, try to get eyes on the pack by the crossroads." Harris saluted with 2 fingers and dropped back into the turret. His Sherman peeled away, its improvised armor rattling as it bounced over the uneven ground. Behind them, Hafner watched the spectacle from the hedgerow. He saw the Americans moving with purpose. He saw their tanks shrug off damage that should have destroyed them. He saw the King Tiger fire and miss. And as he watched Carter's Sherman lead the charge despite being hit twice, a realization formed like ice in his veins. These weren't crude modifications. These were battlefield answers. And the Americans were learning faster than German doctrine could keep up. "Sir!" Krantz shouted. "Orders?" Hafner looked at the advancing Shermans, their patchwork armor glowing in the rising sunlight, scars of near-death plastered across their hulls. He gave the only order that made sense. "All crews, fall back. We delay them, or we die." The battle was far from over. Hafner's voice barely faded before the German crews scrambled into motion. Men pulled ammunition crates by their straps, stumbling through churned mud. Others seized rifles and sprinted toward the deeper woods, where the ground sloped upward toward a second defensive line. The pack crews abandoned their half-dug gun pits, shouting to one another as the thrum of the King Tiger's massive engine echoed closer. Despite its intimidating presence, even the Königstiger wasn't meant to fight alone, and Hafner knew it. But the Americans didn't give them space. Carter's Sherman thundered forward, the smell of burned powder and diesel thick inside the hull. Every bolt, every welded patch, every improvised plate rattled and groaned as the tank barreled over the road embankment. "Lou, the Germans are scattering." Roland shouted, swerving to avoid a crater. "They're falling back to the crossroads," Delgado added. "I see movement, trucks, infantry, they're regrouping." Carter nodded to himself. That crossroads was the key to the entire advance. If the Germans held it, they could funnel reinforcements in and maintain pressure on the valley. If the Americans took it, the line would collapse. And the King Tiger was moving toward it as well. "Roland," Carter said, voice taut, "take us along the orchard line. Keep the trees between us and that Tiger." Roland swung the Sherman left. Wet leaves smacked the hull. Branches scraped across the welded plates and sandbags. Through the periscope, Carter saw Blue 3 flanking right, kicking up mud as it went. Behind them, Blue 6 and Blue 9 fanned out, all patched together in their own ways. Some had concrete molded into rough curves around their turrets. Others had spare track links bolted like armor scales. They didn't look like a tank platoon. They looked like survivors who had built their own shield against German steel. The King Tiger rumbled into view again, its massive bulk emerging from the fog like a cathedral on treads. Its turret rotated, slow, deliberate, as if savoring the act, toward Blue 3. Tiger aiming. Delgado barked. Carter slammed his palm against the intercom. Harris. Brake right. Hard right now. Blue 3 jolted and swerved, just as the 88mm gun fired. The Tiger's shell missed by inches, detonating against a rocky outcrop and showering the tank in fragments. Close one, Carter muttered. But the Tiger wasn't the only threat. Ahead, at the crossroads, German infantry hurried into position behind overturned carts and stone walls. A third Pak-40, smaller, partially camouflaged, was being swung around to face them. Delgado spotted it immediately. New Pak. Dead ahead. Carter didn't hesitate. Load heat. We're using heat? Delgado asked, already reaching for the round. They set up a kill zone, we break it or we're done. The loader slammed the heat shell into the breech. The cannon locked with a metallic thunk. On the way. Delgado growled. The Sherman's gun fired, the recoil punching back into the turret. The shell screamed across the intersection and slammed into the Pak's shield, blasting the weapon off its carriage and sending its crew sprawling. But the crossroads was still a hornet's nest. German MG-42s opened up, tracers slicing through the morning haze. Bullets pinged against the Sherman's added plates, sparking off welded track links, chewing into sandbags. The extra armor absorbed the impacts and dull thuds. Inside, Carter's voice was calm. Roland, keep pushing. We punch through before that Tiger gets a clean line. The Sherman plowed forward. German infantry scattered, diving behind crates and broken wagons as the tank burst into the open intersection. Blue 6 arrived from the right, crashing through a wooden fence and spraying its .30 cal at the retreating Germans. Blue 9 pushed up behind, using its concrete-coated turret as a moving shield for advancing infantry. For a moment, it seemed like the Americans had momentum. Then the King Tiger crested the ridge directly overlooking the crossroads. Its gun depressed, the massive barrel locking onto Carter's Sherman like a predator choosing its prey. Delgado's voice cracked. Lou, he's got us. This is it. Carter didn't look away from the sight. Roland, smoke canisters. Now. Roland yanked the lever. 2 plumes of white smoke burst from the hull and billowed outward, enveloping the Sherman in a battlefield fog of their own making. The Tiger fired. The 88mm shell cut through the smoke like a comet. Roland swerved. The shell roared past the Sherman and obliterated a stone wall behind them, blasting stones across the road like buckshot. The smoke held. The Sherman survived. But the Tiger wasn't finished. Carter knew they had only seconds before the German commander fired again. Delgado, he whispered, get ready. When the smoke clears, we move. The gunner's hands tightened on the controls. Moving where? Carter stared through the swirling haze toward the towering silhouette waiting for its kill shot. Toward the Tiger, he said. We have to close the distance. It can't angle that 88 down fast at point blank. Delgado exhaled slowly. So we run at the thing trying to kill us. That's the plan. In the hedgerow, Hafner watched, stunned. The Americans weren't retreating. They were advancing, even on a King Tiger. And thanks to those ridiculous piles of sandbags, welded plates, and concrete, they were still alive to do it. The smoke shifted. The Tiger's turret began to rotate. Carter braced. And then he yelled. Roland, punch it. The Sherman surged forward. The tank leapt through the dissipating smoke like a charging bull, its engine howling under Roland's heavy throttle. Branches snapped under the treads, mud sprayed outward in thick sheets, and the hull rattled violently as they hit uneven ground. Ahead, the King Tiger loomed, a mountain of steel, its tan and green camouflage blending into the rise behind it. The turret was still rotating, trying to track the Sherman, but Carter knew the Tiger's weakness. That massive 88mm gun couldn't depress quickly at close range. They needed to get inside its minimum engagement envelope. 50 meters, Roland muttered, his knuckles white on the levers. "Keep going!" Carter shouted. The King Tiger fired. The muzzle blast lit the ridge in a flash of white-orange flame. The recoil shoved the tank backward, but the shell whistled over Carter's Sherman, missing by a hair as Roland dove them deeper into defilade. A geyser of stone erupted behind them as the rounds smashed into the far side of the crossroads. Delgado exhaled shakily. "That was meant for us. We're in his blind spot now." Carter leaned into the periscope. The Sherman was now so close that the Tiger's massive bow plate filled the entire view. "Roland," Carter said quietly, "angle right and climb that bank. We get on his flank before he can traverse." Roland didn't question it. He gunned the engine. The Sherman lunged up the embankment, treads clawing for grip. Dirt cascaded down as the tank heaved itself onto the German tank's left side. The Tiger commander, Hauptmann Klaus Reiter, popped his hatch, shouting to the loader below him. "Schneller! Traverse, traverse! Bring the gun around!" But the Tiger's massive turret turned like a cathedral door, strong, inevitable, but painfully slow. And the Sherman was already where it needed to be. "Delgado," Carter said. "Turret, 40 degrees left. Aim for the side plate, just behind the sprocket." Delgado swung the gun, breath rapid, heart hammering. "I've got him." The Tiger's heavy machine gun opened up, stitching the ground and hull with arcs of tracers. Ricochets pinged off welded track links and sandbags. The Sherman shook under the impacts. Roland yelled through the intercom, "Lou, he's trying to chew us up." "Stay steady," Carter ordered. "He can't traverse fast enough." "We have him." The Sherman's gun thundered. The AP round slammed into the Tiger's thick side armor, and bounced, shrieking away in a shower of sparks. Delgado snarled. "Damn it. No penetration." Carter didn't flinch. "Heat next." "Loader." The loader jammed a heat round into the breech so fast he burned his glove. "Up." The Tiger's turret kept grinding toward them. Another second, 2 seconds, and the 88mm might finally swing down far enough to fire. "Fire!" Carter barked. Delgado pulled the trigger. The Sherman rocked back as the heat round blasted out of the barrel. A burst of flame illuminated the Tiger's flank. The round struck, and this time, the effect was immediate. A burst of smoke and sparks erupted from the impact point. The Tiger shuddered violently, its tracks grinding as the driver instinctively hit the brakes. A gout of flame spat from a vent near the engine compartment. Ryder ducked into the cupola just as a fireball whooshed out of the left exhaust grill. "Hit!" Delgado shouted. "We hit something important." But the Tiger wasn't dead. Inside the German tank, Ryder shouted through smoke, "Führerlöscher! Schnell! Loader, get ready, we can still kill them." The Tiger's engine whined. The flame sputtered. And the turret continued to rotate. Carter knew they had only seconds. "Roland, get us around his rear. He's still moving." The Sherman swung behind the Tiger, treads grinding, mud splattering high against the German tank's hull. The Tiger tried to counter-rotate, but its engine coughed, sputtered, and its massive bulk shuddered violently. Delgado had the rear plate in his sights now. "Lou, he's ours." The rear armor was the Tiger's Achilles heel. "Send it," Carter said. The Sherman fired again. This time the heat round burned straight into the Tiger's rear armor, blowing open a panel and sending a gout of flame roaring out the back. The Tiger rocked as something inside detonated, ammunition, coolant, fuel, Carter couldn't tell which. The cupola hatch burst open and Ryder climbed halfway out, choking on smoke, waving his men to bail. Flames licked around the turret ring. The Tiger whined, groaned, and then went still. It was over. Inside the Sherman, no one spoke for several seconds. Just the hum of the engine. The crackle of the burning Tiger. and the distant retreating shouts of German infantry falling back beyond the crossroads. Finally Delgado broke the silence. "Lou, we just killed a king tiger." Carter exhaled, long and slow. "Yeah. We did." Roland let out a shaky laugh. "Guess this barnyard armor wasn't so stupid after all." Carter looked out through his periscope at the burning hulk of the tiger, smoke twisting into the morning sky. The improvised Sherman, with its sandbags, welded plates, and concrete scars, sat beside the dead giant, alive because of American ingenuity that the Germans had mocked. But now, looking at the wreck, it was clear who had the last laugh. And the battle wasn't finished yet. Infantry still had to secure the crossroads. German reinforcements were still out there. And the Shermans had more work to do. "All right, boys," Carter said quietly, "we're not done. Let's finish this fight." The Sherman's engine growled. And the patchwork tank rolled on. In the end, the Japanese commanders who once mocked America's toy boats were forced to confront an uncomfortable truth: victory in war doesn't always belong to the largest guns or the biggest ships. Sometimes, it belongs to the fastest, the boldest, and the men willing to slip into the darkness with no guarantee of return. For the PT boat crews of the Pacific, the war was fought yards from the enemy, close enough to smell burning fuel, close enough to hear enemy sailors shouting orders in the night. They fought with wooden hulls against steel giants. They faced aircraft, destroyers, and searchlights with nothing but speed, guts, and a pair of torpedo tubes. Yet they changed the course of battles. They disrupted supply lines. They forced the Imperial Navy to divert resources. And they proved that courage, innovation, and relentless aggression could outweigh 1,000 tons of armor. To the Japanese Navy, the PT boats were never supposed to matter. But by the time the sun rose on the later years of the Pacific War, they mattered a great deal. Today, the legacy of the PT boats lives on, not in their size, but in their impact. A reminder that in the vast Pacific, even the smallest spark can set the night on fire. This is the story of the American PT boats, dismissed as toys, feared as predators of the dark,